All right, let's begin the final session for today, which is called Left, Right or Center, Politics and Ideologies. After this session at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., we have a music performance by Priya Purushotthamanan. So that will be the last session, a music performance, called Stories and Melodies of the Agra Gharana. This session is on politics and ideologies, titled Left, Right or Center. We have three speakers. May I invite first Mr. Jaithirth Rao, fondly known as Jerry Rao, on stage. Yeah. Jerry Rao has spent over 2 decades in global leadership roles at Citibank before founding Emphasis, IT firm, later acquired by EDS, and subsequently HP and Blackstone. He later founded VBHC, Value Homes and Home First Finance, and has served as chairman of NASSCOM and chair of the board of trustees of the India Foundation for the Arts. A long-time columnist for the Indian Express, Swarajya, and The Print. He's the author of Gemini 2, Notes from an Indian Conservative, The Indian Conservative, and Economist Gandhi. Thank you so much. Mr. Sanjaya Baru, can you please come on stage? Mr. Sanjaya Baru is a policy analyst, writer, and columnist. He has served as the editor of the Economic Times, the Financial Express, Business Standard, and the editorial page editor of the Times of India and the Indian Express. He was the media advisor to former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and director for Geoeconomics and Strategy, International Institute of Strategic Studies in London. He has been associated with a variety of institutions. His books include The Accidental Prime Minister, also on the Bombay Plan, and more recently on the nature of elites in India. But I think I should really be introducing him as an alum of the Hyderabad Public School. So welcome back. I believe he's coming to school after 55 years. So it's a real homecoming for him. And I asked him which house he belonged to, because if you see the top of the stage, there are these beautiful houses of the school, like the Nalanda house and the Takshila house. And Sanjaya Baruji was with the Vijayanagara house. So you'll see the yellow out the end. So that was his house, in school. So welcome back to your alma mater. Finally, we have Narayani Basu. Please request you to come on stage. She was, of course, speaking yesterday on K.M. Panikkar. She is the best-selling author of V.P. Menon, the Unsung Architect of Modern India, and Allegiance, Azadi and the End of Empire. A historian and foreign policy analyst, her current work focuses on the lesser-known but key figures in the story of Indian independence. A Man for All Seasons, her biography of K.M. Panikkar, is her third book and has already garnered critical and popular acclaim. Over to you, Narayani, to maneuver this very interesting conversation we're going to have on politics and ideologies.
Thank you so much, Chinmay. I can't wait for this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Narayani, just 1 second. I just forgot one additional thing. May I invite Professor Rakesh Basant, co-founder of the History Literature Festival, to present the stalls.
Thank you so much. And as I was saying, thank you all for being here. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a conversation that none of us are going to forget very easily. I want to get right into it because I think both our speakers this evening have a lot to say on on many subjects that we all have many opinions about. But what I want to do first is to sort of set the stage, so to speak. By asking both of you. You both have experienced the state that you have written about very differently. So I want to ask you both to sort of set the stage for us in terms of how that has been and how that has also shaped and informed the books that you've written and the opinions that you've had over the years. So, Jerry, if we could start with you.
Thank you so much. And thanks to you, and enjoyed your session very much yesterday. And thanks very much to the Rakesh and to Chinmay and to the organizers of this conference. And thanks to the audience for being here. Actually, a couple of days back, we did a Zoom call where Sanjay and I talked about our evolutions a little bit. Today, I am very much part of the quote-unquote conservative intellectual establishment, for whatever it's worth, of our country. But it wasn't always this way. I remember in 1969 demonstrating in front of the US consulate in Madras when I was in college. Ho 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 Chi Minh, NLF will win. So from that kind of leftist intellectual origin, if you will say, in Kannada we always say Rishi Mula, Nadi Mula. So it's like Nadi Mula. It's a river, when it starts, is always a small spring. You can never imagine it'll become a big river. And a Rishi, his parents are always dubious, so don't ask about it. So it's that kind of journey from a Mula that started somewhere and has now landed me somewhere else. I think the first conversion, I've had 3 or 4 conversions, happened in Ahmedabad at IIM, where it became clear that on the economic side, state planning was ruining our country. We're talking about 1971 to 73, the height of leftist economics in our country. 1973 was when the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act was introduced. So you can think it was one of the most tyrannical acts. So that was one conversion. Second conversion was 79 to 81, when I was at the University of Chicago. And I always tell people, I have shaken hands with Milton Friedman. Actually, he had left the university then. He was in California, but he was visiting and I saw him from a distance. Very short fellow, actually even shorter than me, which tells you, really short guy. But I went running up to him and shook his hands. So there was a change in Farmer, McCloskey, Alaba, the environment in Chicago, certainly on the economic side, further moved me towards what was the market-friendly or the market kind of situation. The next and last conversion has been more recent. I would say in the last 15, 20 years. After I was kind of exiting my business life, as Chinmay pointed out, I sold my company in 2008-9, and I spent a year as entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School with no work, just relaxing. That's when I put together my book, Notes from an Indian Conservative. And this was the third conversion, wherein I came to the conclusion that merely believing in free markets and being an economic liberal, whatever that means, is not sufficient. Because liberalism, I started finding as a fairly phony and bogus philosophy, and its originator in modern times was Rousseau. And if you all remember, Rousseau talked about the noble savage, that savages were noble. It was civilization and the institutions of civilization that made the savage ignoble. That is the basic fundamental thing about liberalism. And I started reading up a great deal of Burke. I started Burke for a very particularly interesting reason, not because I was into conservative philosophy, but I was very interested in trying to find out whether there were any English people who had opposed British imperialism and the East India Company. And the most prominent man was Burke. Burke had actually impeached Warren Hastings, and Burke had one of his most brilliant speeches in the House of Commons was on the deaths of the Prince of Arcot. And since I'm from Madras Presidency, from Madras State, for me, Prince of Arcot thing was quite close. But then I started getting into Burke on French Revolution and other matters. And over the next 10, 15 years to coming to today, I would say I've tried to trace the roots of Indian conservatism, which I have found. See, if it's just an imported, effete Western doctrine, oh, there's Burke, there's some Americans, Alexander Hamilton, Madison, it won't sell, and it's frankly not authentic. I do believe that there's a genuine Indian conservative intellectual tradition, going back to the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata, going back to Thiruvalluvar's Tirukkural, and these I consider the foundational texts of Indian civilization, and I believe that they are profoundly conservative documents, as conservative as anything that Burke could have written. Then I have spent a lot of time talking about modern Indian conservatism. I'm sure we'll come to that later, but that's in brief my journey from being a dim-witted leftist to becoming a correct conservative.
First of all, thank you to History Literature Festival, my friend Rakesh, Basant, and Chinmay for inviting me. Those of you who are regulars would know I'm an interloper, but I'm grateful to whoever had to drop out because I've had the opportunity of listening to some excellent sessions yesterday and today and learning a lot. And meeting an old friend, Jerry, after a long, long time. So thank you. I've been asked to be a bit autobiographical in narrating this intellectual journey. Well, I studied in this school. This was called the Jagirdar College. Became famous as Hyderabad Public School. And in the last few years, it's become famous as the school that exports talent. A lot of American companies are run by alum of this school. And my latest book, Secession of the Successful, The Flight Out of New India, is a critique of this talent emigration, what Jagdish Bhagwati called brain drain, and the more recent phenomenon of wealth drain. And therefore, I've been very critical of my school, saying that you guys celebrate all of those who have left the country, while I, in fact, believe that we need to stem both the brain drain and the wealth drain that has been going on. But though I went to this school, my life was outside. I'm from Hyderabad. My entire youth was spent on the streets of Hyderabad. And almost all my friends were student activists. So when I was in college, I was quite naturally with the left. The early 70s was the heyday of left activism in Hyderabad. And then I went to JNU, where I continued to be with the left. And then I became a member, a full-time card-holding member of the CPM. Conducted study classes across Andhra Pradesh, in district headquarters, at colleges around the state, in Telugu, teaching Marx and Lenin, and spent the 70s and 80s as a left-wing activist. And then came Perestroika, Glasnost, and the Tiananmen Square, 1989, 1991. In 1990, I was in Calcutta, And I couldn't find a ticket to get back home. And since I was with the CPM, I went to the Chief Minister's office to help them get me a ticket to get back. And then I casually asked his secretary, what is Jyoti Babu doing? He said, oh, Jyoti Babu has just finished lunch, he's reading the Delhi papers. Why don't you go and see him? So I walked into Jyoti Babu's room and spent the next hour having the most fascinating conversation with Jyoti Basu on what was happening in the world, on perestroika, on glasnost, on Tiananmen Square, on global developments. And he said, you know, my generation has made many mistakes, and I'm now too old to correct those mistakes. Your generation should not repeat our mistakes. It was, in a sense, a turning point for me intellectually, because we were reading a lot of what was going wrong with the two great countries that were symbols of the ideology that we believed in, which was the Soviet Union and China. And of course, in December 1991, the Soviet Union disappeared. And it just so happened that I made a career switch, having taught economics at the University of Hyderabad from 1979 to 1990 for 11 years. I had an opportunity to join the Economic Times as an editor, as an associate editor, which I grabbed and moved to Delhi. And it just so happened that someone else from Hyderabad made it big in Delhi at the same time, which was Prime Minister Narayani Basu, whom I happen to know well from my days in Hyderabad. My father had worked with him. So I then got involved in the Indian experiment of 91, working for the Economic Times, writing on a day-to-day basis, every single day, 500 words minimum, sometimes more than 500 words, on every aspect of the Indian economy as it was moving through its worst economic crisis. And we were evolving out of that crisis, talking to all manner of people, from Manmohan Singh to Venugopal Reddy to Duri Subbarao to, you know, all the shapers, the movers and shakers of the Indian economic policy at that time. And quite without realizing, not consciously, not in a intellectually conscious sense, but very, very unconsciously, one became convinced that what we were doing was the right thing. The liberalization of the economy, the opening up, and then you saw the consequences. I mean, I wrote a paper when I was here at the University of Hyderabad on Indian monopoly capital, which showed that from 1950, 60, 70, 80, for 40 years, the top 100 companies, the names did not change. It's the same Modi's, Dalmias, Singhanias, you know, Kanorias, Tatas, you know, the same companies dominated the top 100. And then we saw between 91 and 96 a complete change. And by the time we came to the end of the 90s, the top 100, all these Marwadis, almost all of them were out. I think only the Birla survived. But you had all kinds of new characters coming in. You had Sunil, the Mittals, the Ruyas, the Munjals, Narayan Murthis, Wipro, complete change in the top 100. So you saw the consequences of policy change. That here was a change in policy that had actual material consequences on the ground. And then to come very quickly to more recent past, in 2022, the Rupa publishers asked me to write a 40,000 word book for a series they were coming out with, 75 years of Indian independence. And they had about 8 books, 75 years of Indian science, Indian music, Indian sport, Indian foreign policy, Indian economy, etc., Indian politics. And they asked me to do the book on Indian economy. And it was meant for undergraduate students. But when I actually sat down and thought about it and started reading books written by scholars and economists, the thought that occurred to me, and that's what brings me to this session. is that in fact the shift that happened in 91 was not so much an ideological shift, but a pragmatic shift. Just as the shift that happened in 69-70, which Jerry spoke about, Indira Gandhi's left phase, was a purely pragmatic shift. She needed the support of the left. Her majority in parliament was at stake. Her government could not have survived, particularly after the 1969 split within the Congress party, without the support of the CPI. And it's this, her political need for the support of the left that made her, introduce land reforms, abolish privy purses and feudal titles, nationalize banks, nationalize mines and series of other industries, etc., etc. I mean, that radical phase was not an ideological phase. It was a very pragmatic response to a political context. Just as 91 was a pragmatic response to political context, right? We were in a crisis, and I've written a book called 1991. The title of the book is 1991, where I document from 1st January 91 to 31st December 91, the events as they happened. The economic events, the political events, and the global kind of geopolitical events, and stitching them all together to show how the economic shift in India was very much a response to the politics of the country and the global geopolitics. So when we talk about left, right, and center, my basic argument now is that almost all these shifts are pragmatic. Many people talk about Nehru's liberalism or left-wing thinking, etc. It was very much a response to the post-colonial situation that he confronted. After all, Nehru did try to bring in foreign capital into the country. He went to the United States, he went to Germany, he went in search of investment. Nobody was willing to invest in India. And it is the fact that he could not get foreigners to invest at that time that made him get the government to invest. And he had the backing of Indian business. And that's my book on the Bombay Plan, which documents the role played by Indian business in fact, creating the intellectual framework for public sector investment. Birla, Tata, G.D. Birla, J.R.D. Tata, Lala Sriram, and Walchand Hirachand, all these guys were involved in the writing of the Bombay Plan. And you have a book I found yesterday on John Mathai, who was one of the authors of the Bombay Plan. And if you read the first and second 5-year plans, which are called the Mahalanobis Plan, and you read the Bombay Plan, and I've written my chapter in this book on the Bombay Plan makes this point, that Mahalanobis was plagiarizing. He's basically copying out of the Bombay Plan. The basic framework was not anything original. I mean, he put in the Harrod-Domar model and all that, which economists will know. But the basic argument of public sector, the commanding heights of the economy, was the argument of the Bombay Plan. So you had Indian business and the Indian left, represented by Mahalanobis, and my guru, Rakesh's guru, K.N. Raj, who was a member of the Planning Commission, who wrote the first 5-year plan, very much on the left. They were all saying the same stuff in the 50s. Everybody was saying the same stuff in the 90s. And everybody seems to be saying the same stuff now, though the language varies. The rhetoric varies, the language varies. But if you look at the broad direction of policy, so my argument is that, while we categorize policies in terms of its ideological framework, India has had a succession of political leaderships that have been pragmatic in their response to the context that they were faced with. Let me stop with that.
Thank you. That's a wonderful sort of roundup to bring us here. Before I sort of segue into a very sort of almost natural question that I have as a follow-up to you, I do want to come to Jerry first, because Jerry was talking very articulately and eloquently about his various conversions to conservatism. So in that strength, especially in the light of your most recent one, as you say, how do you define conservatism? How do you define conservatism?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because many people come up to me and say, no, you're really a classical liberal. Because classical liberals of the 19th century in England did believe in free markets. And therefore, free markets and freedom of expression and freedom of individuals and so on. And increasingly, I've been rejecting that description because I think liberalism is a bit of a dangerous doctrine. It eventually leads to social and political chaos because it exaggerates the freedom of the individual without talking at the same time of duties and obligations. In the case of free markets, it exaggerates the efficiency factor of free markets without talking about the moral crises that frequently come to haunt market capitalism. So actually, I have started rejecting being called a classical liberal. And if I go particularly come back to the Indian context, there are two strands of our conservatism. One is what I would call the Rajaram Mohan Roy, Rajagopalachari, Swatantra, which has now, of course, disappeared as a party, school of conservatism, which was pro-free markets and otherwise relatively loose. They had no position on whether Hindi should be the official language, no position on prohibition, no position on any of those issues. They just didn't want public sector and licenses. The second school comes from Bonkem and comes down through Deen Dayal to today's BJP. And many people dislike that school, saying it's extreme, it's fascistic, whatever. But I don't agree. I think it's a legitimate school of conservatism in our country. And it is a reaction, in some respects, to extreme Orientalism, Marxism, Christian missionary assaults on our society, and woke ideologies which have recently been very... So at the cultural level, it's a reaction to some of those things. And in the absence of such a reaction, I am concerned that we will go to that atomized liberalism where there are only rights, no obligations or duties. It's very interesting that the National Advisory Council, chaired by Sonia Gandhi, every one of their recommendations was right. Right to education, right to food, right to this, right to that. Right to education, but who's going to pay? There's no talk about that. Right to whatever, health. Hey, doctors are not going to treat you for free. This comes from Rousseau. This goes back to right in the fetal, in the amniotic stage of liberalism. This curse is there. This excessive focus on rights and not enough on duties and obligations. And that's why I today define Indian conservatism. I would have preferred the Swatantra variety. Unfortunately, I don't think that's coming back. But I think our solution is to stay outside the present BJP stuff, but try to influence elements there that are more akin to where people like me would want to be.
Mr. Baru, I want to come back to what you were talking about, which is that your encounters with not just politics, but also a view of how the world was changing ideologically and how that was sort of affecting economic policies in general, and policies per se. And you've given us sort of top-down view for now, but I'd like to come to something that you have dealt with also, which is the fallout of that on the people, in the sense that I think there's been a fundamental shift since liberalization. It's been 35 years. What has that shift been? Because, I mean, today we're sitting in the school that has given us Satya Nadella, right? So what has changed about this generation, or perhaps the previous generation's relationship with this country, that they don't actively want to come back, to give back to it? Because if you look at the Nehruvian era, I mean, this has never been an easy country to settle with. Yet you have people like Bhabha coming back. You have APJ Abdul Kalam transporting spare parts for his rockets on his bicycle. And sure, we can sort of laugh and say, okay, this is a great country for Jugaad, but it's also speaks to the mettle of a generation that did that against strong odds. At that time, in Kalam's time, it was US sanctions, very strong ones. So do you think there's been a shift? And if so, what has that been for the people?
Well, before I answer your question, a couple of things I want to say in response to Jerry, which is one on Swatantra Party. When JRD was funding Swatantra Party, Nehru said to JRD, don't waste your money. In this country, Swatantra Party will never come to power. Why are you wasting your money? G.D. Birla said to JRD Tata, Swatantra politics are not a good businessman's politics. This has been quoted in Kochanek's book on. So you had both G.D. Birla and Jawaharlal Nehru telling JRD Tata that you're wasting your money supporting Swatantra Party. The second thing I wanted to mention was, Manmohan Singh once told me that when he was a student in the 50s, his hero was Minu Masani, who was the ideologue of the Swatantra Party. And he very much was a forum of free enterprise. Then I asked him, but then you worked with Indira Gandhi in that 70 period when she was doing all of this. That was his answer, that we had to do what we did, right? So that's the kind of pragmatism that I keep drawing attention to. And then he became the architect of 91, which is really liberalization. So, I mean, if you look at the career graph of a lot of policymakers, and not just Manmohan Singh, everybody was adjusting themselves to the reality. Now, as far as the consequences of 91 are concerned, and the more recent trend of my emigration, two things I'll say. First of all, in terms of sheer numbers, the rates of growth of the economy improved after 91. But there were two consequences of the growth process. One is that from 91 to, let's say, 2011, 12, over a 20-year period, rates of poverty declined, absolute poverty, from over 50% to below 10%. So there was actually a reduction in poverty as a consequence of an increase in income. But that distribution of income was unequal. And in the recent past, even more unequal. So what we get is a K-shaped growth process. The rich becoming richer, and the poor may not be becoming poorer, but certainly not improving. So you have a decline in poverty, but a rise in inequality. And that has had one important consequence as far as the whole issue of immigration is concerned, that it has financially empowered an aspirational middle class to go out of the country. And as I've mentioned in my book, you look at the data, the acceleration in the emigration of high school graduates, that is those passing out of 12th class, not even undergraduates, from around 2010. It starts growing. And then schools come up, which kind of promise you that if you join this school, you can easily go abroad. And now you have, every day advertisements across the country where people are offering you citizenship, offering you admission, etc. And there are, Indians who are able to afford that. So one consequence of that growth process is the enrichment of an aspirational middle class that is going out. And the point I worry about is that when it began as a trickle in the 60s and early 70s, economists were worried about it. I mean, Jagdish Bhagwati wrote the famous tract on brain drain in the late 70s and early 80s, which spewed a whole literature on the whole problem of brain drain in the economic journals of the time. Today, nobody talks about it. You know, there's hardly any conversation among policymakers about the challenge of brain drain, while it is in fact accelerated enormously over the last couple of decades. The second thing we see is wealth drain, an out-migration of wealth. You know, millionaires, high net worth individuals acquiring property, acquiring citizenship and going out, and all the data suggests. So this is a new phenomenon of elite emigration, which is a interesting political phenomenon because it is the same aspirational middle class and the same business class that is becoming increasingly nationalist, quote unquote, Bharat Mata ki Jai, which is leaving the country. Except they continue the slogans outside. Yeah, they're quite happy to sit in New Jersey and say Bharat Mata ki Jai. But so there is this contradiction of a kind of a nationalism of a class that is actually leaving the country, which I draw attention to. Now, whether you say that all of this is because of what happened in 91, I don't know. I mean, I think 91 in a sense was unleashing of entrepreneurial talent, which is what the data suggests, right? You're completely new industries and new entrepreneurs, which incidentally hasn't happened in the last 20 years. Jerry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at the period 91 to 2011, in those 20 years, the number of new businesses, new entrepreneurial groups that have come up. And then you look from 2011 to 2025, there's a plateau. There are hardly any entrepreneurial boom of the kind we saw post 91. So there is something happening there which I think we need to worry about.
I want to come in, if you, on this whole emigration, brain drain, or whether they are a brain bank, whatever issue. About 15 years ago, NASSCOM had actually sent me to Washington, D.C. to testify before the U.S. trade representative. And during the break after testifying, in official testimony you give kind of inane, kind of maudlin things, saying this, that, and the other. But I took two of them aside in the coffee break and said, look, this H-1B is not sustainable. And you had it at 20, 30,000. Now you're making it 90,000 a year, of which 80% is being claimed by us, which means we're 60, 70,000 a year. This is not sustainable. Yes, you need people. Go for a guest worker. Send them back after 3 years, 5 years if you don't want. But you're selling this as a step towards residency and citizenship. It's no longer about working. And, it just didn't register. The American mind, or particularly of the Democratic kind of party people, for them, immigration is good, period. They just do not want to have any nuanced discussion about it. And I was trying to tell them, it's not good for us. I don't want all our best people. I was running an IT company, right? All our best people go there, don't want to come back. How am I going to run this? So, it was, obviously, there was a selfish interest. But it was also this not sustainable. This is not an equilibrium proposition. And today, you're seeing the backlash. We've added a couple of million people within 10, 15 years. That's a hell of a lot of people. They're all in urban America. They're all in specific professions. And you're seeing the backlash. So we should be more nuanced, more careful about these things. If you look at, we never study older diaspora studies properly. Guyana, Indians, blacks were pretty much 50-50, 51-49, right? And Chetty Jagan, who was Indian origin, left-wing, minor left-wing, not extreme, becomes prime minister. Within 6 months, CIA is busy there. setting the blacks up. And Forbes Burnham, the American candidate, takes over. So the racial tension between Indians and blacks obviously goes up. Fiji. I mean, if we had studied those, we could have anticipated today's American backlash. Now, I think, look, we're a democratic country. We can't say we won't give you passports, we won't give you money to go and study there, or if US gives you a visa, we won't let you go, which other countries can do. Other countries hold families hostage. Our neighbor to the north routinely holds families back in their country hostage when their students go abroad. We can't do that. But I think for us to simply think that this is going to be easy, and again with the India-EU, we have spent a lot of time negotiating freedom of movement. I'm not sure that's so smart. I think looking for a guest worker program is smarter, where they know and we know and the individual knows after 3 years, 5 years, you're coming back. Now, you were talking about why Baba came back. Baba came back because he couldn't get American citizenship at that time. Only after 1965, after Lyndon Johnson changes. So anyone who went abroad in the 50s, Krishnamurti, my friend's father, who later became managing director of Banana Fruit Development Corporation, he was in Michigan on August 14, 47, hoisting the Indian tricolor on the Ann Arbor campus. Came back in the 50s, but after 65, things changed.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't actually answer that question of yours. Thank you for reminding me. You know, there is a change. You see, Baba may not have got American, but the fact is, in the 50s, Jawaharlal Nehru personally called or wrote to a range of people inviting them back. I know this for a fact from my own research. Several people were invited by Nehru to come back. From Baba was one of them, Vikram Sarabhai, Jnana Chandra Ghosh, who started IIT Kharagpur. In fact, Dinesh Sharma was sitting here, I will tell you more names. Around Hyderabad, a whole lot of public sector research institutions like RRL, CCMB, NGRI, all came up because of individuals who, Vinod Gaur, Hari Narayan, all of them were outside India. And each one of them was invited back home by Nehru. So in fact, my argument is that you had a period of real nationalism when highly talented Indians came back, set up the Department of Atomic Energy, the nuclear program, the space program, the chemical laboratories, the physical laboratories. So you actually had a period of real nationalism. Today, I keep asking people in Delhi, give me one name of the eminence of a Baba or a Sarabhai or any one name that this government has been able to attract back home in the last 10 years.
And you do see that our neighbor to the north is doing that very successfully.
Who?
Our neighbor to the north, attracting people back. It was not just Nehru, it was his chelas also. Ravi Mathai, the first director of IIM Ahmedabad, every year went to America, across the table made offers. He couldn't pay as much money as the Americans could, but he was very clever. He said, there's a bungalow on the campus for you, and there's a decent English medium school close by for your children. I mean, every director of IIT I have spoken to tells me that that Kendriya Vidyalaya on campus is key to attracting people back. That is what they need, the flat on the campus, and they need that Kendriya Vidyalaya for their kids. Otherwise, they will stay back in wherever they are, Ohio, Oklahoma, fairly boring places, but you know, life is okay there. So this is something that I think overall we as a country need to discuss. And how can China do it? What are they doing? We read Western media, we never read any other thing about China. Oh, it's a very bad country, it's a prison, everybody is ill-treated. Then why are people voluntarily leaving America and going there? So there must be something, A, that is untrue about Washington Post, what it tells us, and there must be something that they're getting right. Because human capital is ultimately the only thing that makes a country great. It's not coal or oil or gold. We all know that. It's human capital. And we have to have a national debate on this matter.
I think that is actually a wonderful point at which to sort of open this up to the audience, because I think there will be many questions for both our speakers. Before I do that, though, I do want to ask you once, Jerry, why you feel that you've emphasized on the importance of Indian intellectual tradition and traditional texts, etc. I wanted to know why you feel, I mean, given the range of topics and debates that we've covered just in under an hour, why do you feel these are important in 2026, that we still need to remember them, rehabilitate them, re-look at them today?
You know, that's a very fascinating question, because the problem with this whole Orientalism and the way we have been educated and our minds colonized, etc., is that if today politically, and Sanjay talks about this, what is pragmatic? If I went to go try and sell an idea that this comes from Edwin Burke and Alexander Hamilton, even in this room, people are going to reject it. They're going to reject it. But if I say, this is what Tiruvalluvar is saying, this is what Chanakya is saying, Shanti Parva is saying, there's a certain respect, there's a certain positive reaction. So it's almost a marketing reason to find conservative antecedents in Indian conservative traditions, intellectual traditions, to sell it. But it's also true. I'm not making this up. Rajadharma, as discussed by Bhishma, I'm not making it up, that Chanakya talked about Shadbhaga, 1/6, 16%, as what the state should take, the king should take. Now, Madam Sitaraman takes 40% from me. But, 1/6 was what he advocated. And I think we need to talk about this, to say that I'm not just quoting Federalist papers. This is about, and in fact, that's one reason the left lost out in India. They kept quoting Marx and Lenin, never understood caste system, never paid attention to the Indian. And it's also true. I'm not making it up. Go read Tirukkural and you will see it is a very conservative text.
Thank you. On that note, are there questions from the audience? And there are two. Can we pass mics? There's a lady in front.
Sorry. So on this whole brain drain and not brain drain thing, I have a question, which might be somewhat provocative. But are we really just listening to our respective echo chambers? Because I know a ton of Chinese who have chosen to live in the US and are struggling to get their green cards after 15 years of being on an H-1B and still not wanting to go back to China. And I also know a ton of Indians who have come back to India mostly for family reasons and of varying ages and, interests, who have just chosen, because India is now a place where people want to be, because, I guess some of the things that you said, which is, liberalization, the ability to have the kind of lifestyles you pretty much can in the West, and so on. And also, of course, the family culture, etc. So I'm curious about whether, and do we really want Satya Nadella to come back to India? Possibly not. But I'm sure there's a ton of other people and maybe not quite that level, who are back in India and are doing lots of things around here. So, just throwing a thought out.
You know, unfortunately, when I was writing my book, I tried to get some data on this. The government of India stands up in parliament and gives you data on Indians leaving India. The government of India does not have data on Indians returning to India. Therefore, I cannot answer your question based on official data, because everybody says, oh, people are coming back. I'm saying, tell me, give me numbers. Which institution, which university, which research laboratory, which company, how many have come back? You don't get data. So this is just talk. This is not based, you know, each one of us may know one or two people, but at the macro level, we have not been able to capture any return of talent to this country. What we are capturing is exit. What is worse is we are encouraging exit. The government of India has amended its Immigration Act and called it now Immigration and Facilitation Act. The Foreign Minister of India recently officially launched a private initiative called GATI, which is Global Access to Talented Indians, which is run by Sanjeev Bikhchandani and Manas Sabarwal, which is really helping Indians to get out of India. It was launched by a foreign minister of the country. And I ask, is this the responsibility of the government to actually help Indians leave India? My school, this school, celebrates all its alumni living abroad. Is that something you should be proud of? That your alumni are building. I have a chapter in my book called Indians in Making America Great Again. Indians in MAGA. And when I started writing about this in my columns, an organization, an outfit of NRIs in the US called In Diaspora hurriedly tried to collect some data, and now they boast what is the contribution of Indians to the American economy, right? Now, that is one data point we have, but my guess would be that the actual numbers are much more, because you have to quantify the addition to American GDP of all these Indians who are running American corporations, running American universities, running American research laboratories. And then you will find that Indians are actually making America great again. Okay, some people come back, some people don't come back, but I think we need to look at the macro picture.
No, there are a couple of people, just to interject, on YouTube. I think one's from Hyderabad, one's from Bangalore, who actually run sessions for those Indians who want to return. Where should you take a house? How should you live? How should you reconnect with your parents or your in-laws? And which schools you can send your kid to. It's kind of fascinating to see that. But I agree with Sanjay. I think it's probably a 10-to-1, 20-to-1 ratio. And it's not significant. It's simply not significant.
So just I had a question for Jerry, which I'll ask. But something you just said triggered another question for me. So if you don't mind, I'll ask both. The question for you, Sanjay, is why does it have to be an either-or debate? Why can't we celebrate global success and also talk about how to replicate that in India, right? And why do we need to make this a polarized conversation? Why can't we just say, yes, we've had successfully scaled peak talent in the most competitive of the environments. How do we create that here? Wouldn't that be a more meaningful debate to have? Okay, so you do agree, right? So maybe I'd like to hear what are some of the specific recommendations you have on that. But Dr. Jerry, I have a question for you, which is, you talked about the conservative, the two schools of conservatives, Indian conservative thought, right? And the second thought you said was what's most akin to BJP, etc., etc. Now, by associating it with BJP, then again it becomes a polarized conversation. Is there a healthy way to have that conversation? Because I think, like you, we need it. This country needs that kind of grounded, rooted, our own conservative
This
thought.
is a very conceited Indian urban upper middle class elite question, because it starts with somehow saying BJP is bad. Any association with that is a source of discomfort.
Fair enough, it comes across to you like that. But my point was that leads to more polarization of conversations. Is there another way of doing it is my question to you.
That's fine by me. Because as Sanjay says, politics is about pragmatism. You know, they will ally today with AIDMK, with Janata Dal. There is, politics is not, and if there is polarization, that's fine.
Oh, it's fine. Okay.
There are many people who don't want to talk to me because I am not willing to condemn BJP. But I think they're a fairly legitimate political party with legitimate political constituency and actually quite smart, quite clever, quite successful. And they have a legitimate intellectual tradition. Don't underestimate Deen Dayal. That's the other thing. We are only taught this. They have made sure, Nurul Hasan and this Romila Thapar and all these bogus nitwits have made sure that we are only taught this left-wing Welton Shaung. Deen Dayal Upadhyaya is not a trivial intellectual. They have their own, and okay, we may not agree with every detail, but then you can't accuse them of not being patriotic. Okay, you do agree.
Can we have the next question, please?
Just one question around immigration and sort of immigration and talent. Maybe there are two questions there. One is, why would the government not actively look to bring back talent? Like, in your mind, what's happening there? What's the dynamic there? Why is the government not making a more concerted effort? And two, in the absence of a regime that's like China's and with its whole 1,000 Talents program, which is essentially supported and driven by the government, we are not in a situation like that. How would the government go about it? How should the government go about it?
You know, see, the argument in my book is we have now an elite consensus on immigration. I draw attention to what I call elite immigration. The Indian elite has intellectually seceded. We think that you have in Delhi a government which is nationalistic, but intellectually they are oriented to the West. Maybe out of fear of China, maybe, but it's not just that. The nationalism is a very superficial, thin layer of essentially an aspirational middle class, which has voted this regime into office. So there is an elite consensus of thinking that life is better outside India. And the numbers are staggering. You know, I've recorded it in my book. The numbers are staggering, they're rising. Now, the question is, what is the role of the government? See, governments can do very little. First of all, individuals go in search of better life, right? I can't stop you from going out. What I can certainly do is to make it easier for those who are working here to work here, and for those who wish to return to work here. So we talk about ease of business, we talk about ease of living. In fact, Prime Minister Modi spoke at Red Fort on 15th August 2024 on the need for ease of living, promoting ease of living. And I keep asking, 24 August till now, has ease of living improved? Has it made it easier for us to live wherever we are living, you know, in wherever, whichever environment we are living? These are the imperatives that will make it easier for people to stay back. The question of why should people stay back? I mean, you know, the problem with this elite consensus is we imagine that we are somehow, we have arrived because Indians are running multinational corporations. Our per capita income is $3,000. The nationalism that drove the 50s was the nationalism that said, I'm a poor country. I have to develop. And in order to develop, I have to invest in human capital and create that capital so that that human capital can be transformed or can be converted into physical capital, intellectual capital, financial capital. So that is where retaining the brain power that you create becomes important. But if you say, I don't care, Indians are going all over the world, let them go, I have no policy about retaining them. That is what I'm criticizing. I'm not criticizing individuals for leaving the country. I'm criticizing the government for not having a policy for retaining talent. And I keep making the point, why did Atal Bihari Vajpayee choose January 9th as Pravasi Bharatiya Divas? What is the significance of January 9th? It was the day on which an Indian who went abroad to study, acquired academic qualifications outside India, in the United Kingdom, went and worked in South Africa, acquired professional qualifications in South Africa, and after 20 years came back to India and liberated India. Mahatma Gandhi, right? January 9th was the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas because Gandhi did. So I keep arguing, I have nothing against Indians going overseas, study in the best universities, acquire the best qualifications, work in the best companies, acquire professional qualifications, do it by all means, and then come and work here. You know, Venki Ramakrishnan, who was a Nobel Prize winner in physics, said to the Hindu recently that he said, I know a lot of scientists who want to come back to India, but every Indian scientific institution is so bureaucratic in their systems that nobody feels that, you know, they can be as creative here as they are wherever they're working. Now that is something the government should address. Why are our research institutions not able to attract this talent which wants to come back? And that is what takes me back to the 50s. In Nehru's time, he created institutions which actually brought talent back. That is what we need to do.
Yeah, there are some
I'd like to come in. There's two things I want to tell you. One is the biggest opponents of Indian talent returning in the academic world are the existing professors in Indian universities. They are very worried about seniority, about this, that, and the other. And therefore, you will find in the next 10 years, as we get more private universities, they might be able to do a better job in terms of attracting. It's going to be very tough. And the few autonomous public universities like IITs and IIMs, if you notice, every 5 years, irrespective of which party is in power, the HRD minister wants to appoint the board of governors, the director, do something, whether it is Arjun Singh or it is whatever his name was a BJP HRD minister. So this is an ongoing problem in the public sector. The second issue is, I have many friends of mine have wanted to come back. They are so scared of the tax issues and the FEMA issues. Can you have a simple booklet? Frequently asked questions. What tax return should I file? How many days? 180 days, 181 days. What is the foreign exchange? Can I retain my account back in New York or should I? No. If my wife stays back, I come. We don't have a simple FAQ booklet for returning Indians. China has a whole movie on this, making it easy. Here we have two YouTube guys on their own from Hyderabad and Bangalore giving all these details. Then you have to go back and check with your accountant or lawyer if they are correct. It's very, very difficult to come back, especially after 10, 15 years.
there are questions at the
Very
back
difficult.
this side. Two questions, one the gentleman and then behind you the lady in black.
Yeah. My question is, we chose the mixed economy model and we decided to have some industries for the public sector and some for the private sector. And when private sector was given, they were given licenses. And there was this set of people who continue to keep getting those licenses, including Tatas and Birlas and all that. And we said that in 1991, we are going towards free markets and we are getting liberalized. And as Mr. Baru has said that, we were able to have a change in the set of people who were at the top of Indian business groups. But suddenly we are seeing again a K-shaped kind of thing where large businesses are becoming bigger and bigger and smaller businesses are not able to come into the big one. Even in the IT industry of which Mr. Jaithirth Rao is there, it's the same Infosys, Wipro, TCS kind of people. We haven't seen a new company coming and breaking into the big ones. So this kind of, or some people are even accusing the current kind of business environment as crony capitalism. So I was wondering whether this crony capitalism of today, is it any different from the mixed economy or license permit Raj of the pre-independence, pre-liberalization era?
I think this crony capitalism propaganda that is being done by the left liberal press in America, Economist and Financial Times, and all these foreign media against our country is really an attempt to destabilize us. They don't want Indian companies to do well. Now, Adani has a port in Haifa, in Israel. He has a port in Australia, and a railway line, and a coal mine. Now, these are strategic assets for India. Now, if there's a Mitsubishi in Japan or a Samsung in Korea, those countries treat them as national champions and back them up. That doesn't mean when Samsung chief executive does something corrupt, there is no case against him. There is. But the Korean government doesn't ditch Samsung. I think we should be very careful about this most recent fashionable accusation that, crony capitalism is back. Ambani, by the way, the Jamnagar refinery is the largest single refinery in the world. 2, it is the most efficient. 3, it is the most modern. It is the only refinery that can handle light Arabian crude, light Iranian crude, and heavy Venezuelan sour crude. We should not, yes, you may have other issues with Ambani, you or his brother, whatever you do, whatever you want. But let's not go against our national champions. There was a president, I think Coolidge or somebody of America, he said, what is good for General Motors is good for America. It was quite open when that was the largest industrial corporation in the world. Why? And the present president openly says, I'm the biggest salesman for Boeing. They are not being shy. I don't know why we should get sucked into this stupid criticism of crony capitalism. Look at, based on some criteria for the next 5th generation fighter jet, HAL is out. Who are in? Baba Kalyani's Pune company, L&T, Bharat Forge, L&T, and Tata's. They are there. Now, let them, is this crony capitalism? If one of them gets it, I don't know. I think we should support Bharat Forge, L&T, and Tata's. They are good for the country. And this goes back. I disagree with Sanjay about the 50s, although he is right. Many of the Bombay Plan ideas came into the Planning Commission. The fact is, even starting in the Constituent Assembly, between 47 and 50, there were at least 50, 60, 70 members of Parliament constantly cursing Tata and Birla. And in Bengal, Sir Biren Mukherjee, who was running Indian Alliance Steel, the Bengali labor union said, we don't mind if he were a Marwadi or if he were an English guy lending. We won't let a Bengali succeed as an entrepreneur. I mean, the whole, the amount of Galis that Ram Manohar, Lohia, Madhu Limay, all these totally anarchic people used to give to Tata and Birla, instead of saying they're patriotic people trying to help the country grow. Many of them, by the way, had an easier time under British rule than under Indian rule. And today many of them will say it. At that time they all kept quiet.
Well, I'm glad finally we are having a debate, because till now Jerry and I agreed on so much. I completely disagree with what Jerry has just said. See, first of all, the fact is that the Birlas were the beneficiaries of license permit Raj. There's an entire government report on that. The Subimal Dutt Commission and the Hazari Dutt Commission reports that actually give the data on how the Birlas were favored. Just as the Adani is being favored now by this regime, the Birlas were favored, and that's a fact, and it has been documented. So we've had crony capitalism, as you correctly said in the past, that what we, at least I understand by crony capitalism, is that you favor one business group over another. It's not just that you're favoring business. It is not that you're favoring your winners and your global performers. You're deliberately favoring one business group or another. The Birlas were favored over the Tatas. That's a fact established by government reports. And today, Adanis are being favored over several people. I can name at least one company, my fellow alumni of Hyderabad Public School, Sanjay Reddy and GVK Group, that owned the Bombay airport, were hounded by CBI till they sold it to Adani. Adani, took the Bombay airport away from the GVK family by using Enforcement Directorate and the CBI against a Hyderabad-based business group. And there are many such stories. I mean, this is now well known. I can say it in public. It's been reported by media, etc. But there are many other companies. And you talk to a lot of businessmen. Jerry, I can tell you, I do talk. There is so much anger against the favoritism that Adani has had in the last 10 years. I just mentioned one anecdote. Before the 24 election, I was invited to speak to a group of businessmen in Delhi. And the person who invited me said, look, they're all pro-Modi. So I said, why are you inviting me? I'm not pro-Modi. No, I want them to hear an alternative opinion. So I said, all right. I went and I addressed this group. It was about 15 very wealthy individuals in the home of one of them in Delhi. And when I finished speaking, there was silence in the room. So I said, I know that all of you must be disagreeing with me because I've been told that you're all... So each one of them came out with stories about harassment by ED, by income tax, by CBI, And I said to them at the end of that, listening to their complaints, they said, yes, we are being harassed. I'm not getting this thing because that fellow is being favored by the government. This kind of stories about political favoritism. So I then asked them at the end of the conversation, I said, then why the hell are you supposed to be a pro-Modi group? अरे भाई वो तो हम हिंदू हैं वो हिंदू हैं कैसा और किसी को वोट दें. That was the sum and substance of their support. But the fact is that there's a lot of unhappiness within the private sector about favoritism to one particular group within the country. Now, outside India, you support Indian companies. I agree. I mean, I have no problem. And though, in the case of Mr. Adani, the media has systematically documented how each of the contracts he has got in different parts of the world follow the visit of the Prime Minister. This has been systematically documented. And the most recent one was 10 days back, or 2 weeks back, 10 days back. The newspaper reported that Prime Minister Modi had a long conversation with President Lula of Brazil. But it did not tell us what the conversation was about. It just said, oh, BRICS. We are now chairing BRICS. And so it was about BRICS. And then 2 days later, Mr. Adani announced that he was entering into a collaboration with Embraer, which is a Brazilian aircraft company. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that conversation was meant to facilitate this transaction. But there are any number of such examples.
No, fair enough, Sanjay. I think the terror that the Indian agencies unleash on all citizens goes against any claims for ease of living, whether it is ED or CBI or whatever, or the local police for that matter. And that's something that all of us as citizens should be concerned about. Not just businessmen, by the way. Anybody can be hauled up, can be troubled. But I do want to kind of get into a little bit of detail on this, because there are two ports on the west coast, right? JNPT, Bombay, old Bombay port is still there, believe it or not. We should have shut it down a long time ago, but we have JNPT and we have Mundra. 0.7 to 0.8 days is the turnaround time for a ship in Mundra. 2.5 to 3 days is JNPT. And 0.7 to 0.8 is comparable to Shanghai and Singapore. Now, there may be many problems with them, but that's why I talked about the Reliance refinery also. Operations-wise, these are two terrific operators. And we have to, but if you look at the aircraft, Bharat Forge, L&T, they are not by any means crony capitalist kind of stuff. Tata's maybe. But, you know, I think we should stop worrying about this because we need champions. We need champions. And there will be some here and there. But we do have, by the way, in terms of new stuff, a lot of fintech companies, edtech companies have gone up, come down, whatever, over the last 10 years. And certainly in the finance sector, there have been lots of new fellows who've come and done well. Manufacturing, we still haven't cracked as a country, although there are some people who are getting pretty good at drones, who are getting pretty good at kind of electronic equipment that goes on to aircraft and so on. But we are still. Now, our traditional fellows, Tirupur and so on, have actually continued to maintain steady growth over the last 10 years. None of them have, so this idea that somehow BJP has been against medium industries is not true. Our traditional fellows have all, the shrimp fellows in coastal Andhra, till Trump's tariffs, have maintained steady growth. So I've been looking a little bit kind of, yes, I think there is some concern on the closeness of Adani with the present dispensation. But my bet with you is Adani was quite close with the previous dispensation also. That's just the nature of, and Boeing is close to any American president, trust me. That's the nature of large business. So that doesn't bother me too much. We do need 10 more champions who can be world class, who can run world class ports, refineries, manufacturing companies. We need Bharat Forge, Pidilites. We need more of them. We'll look at the guy in Pune who made the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. We need more, and we need more of those. This city has some outstanding pharma companies. We need more of those, and we need to support them as champions, and unashamedly. There is nothing wrong in supporting Reddy. There is nothing wrong in supporting any of our companies, especially if the issue is competing against a foreign company. There is absolutely no need to have any sharm or sharminda on that.
We have time for one last very quick question from the lady with the mic. And
firstly, thank you for this talk. It's really insightful. A discussion turned to debate. I've come here with my friend. We're students of HPS Begumpet, studying in class 10 at Jaithirth in the Cambridge program. I had a question regarding, you had stated that liberalism is dangerous and it's a dangerous doctrine because it would give people only rights and taking away their obligations. However, my question is that without rights, how would people follow up through those obligations? As in the idea, in the sense that if you don't have the right to happiness or the right to education, you cannot follow through the certain obligations that we need as a country to prevent brain drain. If we don't have the right to happiness, we don't have, as Mr. Sanjay had stated, we don't have ease to live in the country. Of course, we're going to have to leave the country. Without our rights, the obligations that the government expects from us and the obligations that the government has towards the citizens are not complete. And that's why I feel like the point's a bit contradictory.
I think you're absolutely right when it's the issue of the individual apropos or vis-a-vis the government. You know, I don't think the government owes us anything except rights. But liberalism is a pernicious doctrine that goes beyond government-individual relations. If you look at Western Europe today, which is the high citadel of liberalism, the family has collapsed. It is perfectly okay. It is not okay, it is desirable to live outside marriage, to live in multiple relationships. I think they have a word for it, something kind of amorous, polyamorous marriages. It is okay not to go to church. It is okay not to have anything to do with your family, with your city, with your community. So this excess rights and extraordinary rights given to 0.1% of the population. How many people are LGBTQ+? 1%? I don't know. Trans people, extraordinary rights given to them. And the whole obligation thing is falling apart. There is no church attendance. At least in India, we still have social connections. We go to temples. All of us, everyone in this room has been to Tirupati once at least. We do these things. We keep the faith in some respect. And that is what liberalism kills. Now, vis-a-vis the state, I agree with you. The state should not interfere. In fact, it was interesting in yesterday's discussion that Visvesvaraya, who was for central planning, was totally opposed to prohibition. He said the state should not interfere. And Narayani, you are into native states, princely states. When I first came to Hyderabad in 1965-66, my father was working here. If you cross the river into the old Madras Presidency part, there was only one Andhra Pradesh then, no Telangana and Andhra. There was prohibition. But this side in the old Nizam state, there was no prohibition. You could freely drink liquor. Similarly, Bangalore, which was in Mysore state, no prohibition. Prohibition in Madras state, Congress government from 1937. To answer your question, Congress government has been interfering in citizens' lives from 1937 when they got limited power. So don't trust them.
Quick closing remarks.
The one country that will conform to your definition of conservatism, Jerry, is China.
There's a lot of propaganda about China and for that matter about Iran, which we are taking unalloyed from the Western media because we don't have any Indian correspondents in Beijing or Shanghai. Why are Chinese scientists returning to China if it is such a bad place? I don't know. I'm not defending China. I don't care. I've been there. Last time I went there was more than 35 years ago. And the one customer I had in my IT company, which was a Chinese customer, I actually lost business and said, please stop doing business with me. So I'm not pro-China, but I think we should be very careful in thinking that China is some kind of Naraka or something. I don't think so. It's not a hell. People are, there are lots of Indians, by the way, who live in Shanghai, Indian merchants, traders. There's a lot of Indians still staying on in Hong Kong, which we are now told democracy has been killed in. I think, look, I'm sure it's not as nice a place as India, as particularly as Hyderabad, but we should also be careful. We should be careful.
On that note, I think we've run out of time. Thank you so much to Jerry, Sanjaya, and Narayani for taking us to this wide-ranging perspectives. Thank you also to the audience. And the wonderful question by the student out there. It is not my right, but my duty to end this session right now.